he's not going to walk away. It's likely going to be one-on-one between Putin and Trump. I could just imagine in the discussion that Putin would say, we support what we've been working on with you to achieve a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but this is our neighborhood. This is our near abroad. We have interests here.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Dr. Joanne Lisosky, author and journalism educator. We're here to discuss issues of importance to the Caucasus. Today's guest is Richard Kauzlarich. Ambassador Kauzlarich is the former ambassador to Azerbaijan and is a distinguished visiting professor in the Sklar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador.
Good to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me, Joanne.
Let's start with the Washington summit between Azerbaijan and Armenia. How do you evaluate the outcomes of this? Was it a genuine breakthrough?
Well, the last time we spoke, we talked about what was the worst possible outcome, and I was concerned maybe it wouldn't take place at all. But I think just from the point of view of the way the summit unrolled in a public sense, it was very positive. I mean, you saw, President Trump and Prime Minister Pashinyan and President Aliyev kind of in a very positive mood, and there was no sense of the kinds of tension that have gone on in previous meetings. So I think given the experience with Trump summits, some of which have been not so good and some of which have been very good, this was in the very good category. And I think it helped that there had been preliminary contacts between Pashinyan and Aliyev in Abu Dhabi to talk about a lot of the issues that were spoken about here. So, it how shall I put it? It seemed like it was a very natural. I think that's all to the good. Now, is it a major step forward? I think we need to wait to see. The fact that foreign ministers initialed a draft peace agreement, which had been not in the public eye, but certainly worked on for a long time, that's a good thing. I would have been happier if it had been the leaders themselves, the prime minister and the president, initialing the agreement. But we'll take what we have here. But in terms of advancing the process toward a peace agreement, that particular step really didn't take us very far, and we'll have to see what happens in terms of implementing that. Is there going to be a process to resolve the remaining issues, and how is that going to play out? There are a lot of other parts of the summit which I'm not talking about, but I just wanted to focus on that one part because I think it's in many respects the most important, and I think it's been misinterpreted in some media where they've talked about signing a peace agreement. That did not happen. No one expected that to happen, and so I think we need to avoid jumping too far ahead of ourselves on that score.
Well, the agreement includes mutual recognition of the 1991 borders. So from your perspective, is this a significant step? And what does this mean for Azerbaijan and Armenia? And is it a setback for Russia?
Well, on the terms of the setback for Russia, I think it still remains to be seen. The Russians obviously were not very happy with the whole idea to begin with. I have not seen a particular Russian reaction to the provision that you spoke about. However, the border issue is absolutely critical. It's critical to signing a peace agreement. It's critical to the whole trip idea. And it is one of those areas where, quite frankly, there actually has been some progress between, working groups, bilateral working groups without mediators. Azerbaijan and Armenia have been working on border adjustment. It's just beginning, and I think it needs to be speeded up to reach a final understanding. But I'm not into the details of the 1991 process to be able to say much beyond simply reinforcing the importance of border demarcation as a necessary step in moving this whole process ahead.
So while we haven't heard anything overtly from Russia, we have heard from Iran, yes, and they openly oppose this American-controlled corridor. And how do you see Tehran or even Moscow trying to influence or even maybe undermine this agreement?
Well, from what I've seen, again, in the press, Iran has made it quite clear that they see this not as a peace corridor, but as a corridor of war, which I think was the expression. I'm not surprised that the Iranians have had this reaction. I mean, they made their when Azerbaijan was pushing the Zangezur corridor idea before the summit. The Iranians had been very, very clear that they regarded anything like this as somehow changing the border between Armenia and Iran. And so it's, excuse me, it's not surprising that they've taken this very strong position. Look, I would not set aside any option that Iran might take, including military. There could be economic issues that arise. The trip corridor is a long way from being implemented, and until it is, Azerbaijan is still going to depend on transportation between mainland Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan going through Iran. And the Iranians could disrupt that at any time. And then there's always the Caspian Sea, where Iran has proven in other contexts that it's quite prepared to take steps to, militarily show its muscle toward Azerbaijan. So I think all the, as they say in the diplomatic business, all the options are still on the table for the Iranians, and I think we still need to see. I think I haven't seen anything more for a couple of days, but there was a proposed visit, I think, from the leader of Iran to Yerevan next week. Maybe I got that wrong, but that would be an important signal as well.
So let's talk a little bit about how China might be viewing this agreement. Some say that the U.S. could limit Chinese access to the East-West trade route through that corridor. Do you think that Washington could use this Trump road deal as a strategic counter to China?
That is a bit of a stretch to me. I'm not, first of all, the middle corridor itself, even without the Zangezur trip element, is problematic in many respects. There isn't enough trade from Europe to China to justify economically a corridor that goes across the Caspian and potentially through the Zangezur area. So the economics are still not there. I haven't seen anything from China. My expectation would be that they would probably stay pretty much in lockstep with Russia on this. I guess I just don't see the leverage that this would give the United States somehow because of our involvement in the corridor. to use that against China. I think there are larger questions out there involving the whole middle corridor in the U.S. Role in supporting that project that really put us more directly in contact with and potentially conflict with, in a commercial sense, China.
So this might be a difficult sell for Prime Minister Pashinyan.
Mm-hmm.
Could removing Prime Minister Pashinyan become a stronger objective for the Kremlin right now in the run-up to the June 7 elections?
Well, I'm not an expert on Armenian internal politics. I mean, I was concerned as the summit, was being announced, and that Pashinyan now is very vulnerable, not only to Russian pressure, but pressure from elements in the Armenian American community who do not regard this as a positive step. For them, they're much more inclined to not have Armenia pursue a peace agreement with Azerbaijan under any conditions, but certainly, regarding the what they would call the political prisoners in the Armenian political prisoners in Azerbaijan, and the 120,000 Armenians who were forced out of their homes in Karabakh when Azerbaijan formally took over the entire region. So there's kind of a domestic element of this Armenian domestic politics. There's the diaspora connection because of the Armenian American community in particular, and then of course there's Russia and Iran. So I think I was thinking about this the other day when saw all of the discussion about a Nobel Peace Prize for Trump coming out of this. If this succeeds, I think the people who deserve the Nobel Peace Prize are Aliyev and Pashinyan, because both of them have had to take considerable risks. Aliyev less than Pashinyan, but still risk to make this work. And if it does result in a peace agreement, that's a really big deal. And if the two leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan are able to kind of push it the last few meters, I guess, that are necessary to reach an agreement to be signed, it would be a terrific outcome. But again, without a whole lot of knowledge of internal political dynamics in Armenia, I just, as an outside observer, I just see a difficult period ahead for the prime minister.
So you spoke a little bit about the Armenian diaspora. Do you think that there's significant dissatisfaction with this agreement could have an effect on Washington policy or on the current administration in getting things done? I don't know if you had difficulties with the Armenian diaspora, but I know that Ambassador Bryza was dealing with issues of the Armenian diaspora in the U.S.
Well, the major issue that as ambassador to Azerbaijan was Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, which made my life impossible for 3 years, because all of the things that we were doing to support other new states in the former Soviet Union, we couldn't do in Azerbaijan. And that limitation on U.S. assistance, both economic and security-based assistance, was a negative, and it was there because of the influence of the Armenian American lobby in the U.S. Congress. We are already seeing little signs. This is summer in Washington, so a lot of people are not in town, including the U.S. Congress, but we're seeing signs of opposition, if you will, in the Congress to this positive development, but it's based on one, the Armenians who are still being detained in Azerbaijan, as I mentioned earlier, the future of the former residents of Karabakh, but also this, whatever happened, and I'm still waiting to see the actual executive order, whatever happened with 907, President Trump did something. Again, the press has kind of mischaracterized what he could do. I mean, maybe he just waived 907 as previous presidents had, though Biden did not for his own reasons. So that would be that would allow the U.S. to engage in security assistance with Azerbaijan. I don't think he could suspend 907. It's legislation that would require congressional action. He's in other areas, he's proven he doesn't care that much about what seem to be, legislative limitations on executive behavior. Maybe he did say he was going to, suspend it. But I think in order for anything permanent to happen on 907, it would require congressional support of some kind, and I don't see that in the cards. So once everybody returns from their summer break, I think we need to watch very carefully what kind of response will be coming from the Congress, and whether that has any impact. And I don't think we should ignore the possibility that at the Trump-Putin summit that this might come up. Not that the U.S. would raise it, but Putin has been very clear for a long time that no settlement between Armenia and Azerbaijan is possible unless it is done under Russian auspices. And so, I'm just speculating here. I think we should, as we were surprised by the summit taking place in Washington with Armenia and Azerbaijan, we shouldn't be surprised that maybe something dramatic would come out of the summit between Trump and Putin that would affect what just happened.
I'm so glad you brought up 907. That was going to be another question that I asked. So that's, as you're saying, these are things that we need to keep our eye on. The summit coming up in Alaska, whether President Zelensky is going to be attending or not is up in the air right now. How these things are going to play out in the next week or so is going to be really interesting to watch. And we will be coming back and asking you your response on these questions in the near future, Ambassador Kauzlarich.
Well, it's going to be an interesting time, and it does bear attention, because there are implications flowing from this that are more than just the happy faces and good feelings that came out of the summit on Friday.
Well, and one of the things that came out from an Azeri person that I talked to was the fact that there was no mention of some of the human rights violations that are going on in Azerbaijan now too. There was no mention of that.
Yeah, Gubadibagoglu's continued detention is the face, if you will, of that challenge, and it would have been a great opportunity. And again, we don't know what might have been said between Trump and Alia, but it would have been a great opportunity for Trump to say, look, we're doing all of this for you. You do not need to continue detaining this man. But we don't know what happened.
You have any ideas or perspective on what at this meeting Putin might bring up his reaction to this agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and what might be some of the things that he has to say about this?
Well, this is speculation on my part, but I cannot. I just, as a starting principle, Russia will not accept the U.S. replacing Russia as the determining outside power for resolving the conflict and signing a peace agreement when that happens, and for developing this economic presence in the region, in Armenia, that would basically supplant relationships that have existed for years. I don't think he's not going to walk away, and so in not knowing what the dynamic is going to be, but recognizing that it's likely going to be one-on-one between Putin and Trump. I could just imagine in the discussion that Putin would say, we support what we've been working on with you to achieve a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but this is our neighborhood. This is our near abroad. We have interests here, and the idea of the United States controlling this transportation link would not necessarily be in Russia's interest. And it might be simply a kind of a footnote in a discussion about what happens with Ukraine. It might be more overt, depending on the mood, where Putin would basically make a red line, very visible for President Trump, that this is dangerous territory, and maybe if the United States continues with the idea of a trip, maybe there should be an extra R in there as the Trump-Russia initiative, but somehow involve Russia in that, whatever the consortium is, whether it's it could be like the oil development in offshore Azerbaijan, where you had Lukoil as one of the partners in the consortium. Maybe a Russian partner in the consortium to oversee or develop this transportation link would be appropriate recognition of Russia's role. I don't know, but I'm just saying this is, this meeting is coming up very soon. This will all be very fresh in both Trump and Putin's mind, and so I could imagine some discussion that would go along that would change maybe the idea that this was a kind of a unilateral U.S.-led effort to create this corridor would provide a role for Russia. If that happens, last point, if that happens, then I think Turkey would become very concerned, and so you'd have an additional partner out there trying to become involved in an issue which affects their interests as well.
There's been a great deal of discussion about how Russia holds all the cards in this Alaska meeting. Do you think the fact that President Trump negotiated this deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan is a plus on his side?
A plus on Trump's side?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think he will certainly portray that. That's his mindset. He believes that this is one in a series of peace agreements, if you want to, deals that he's negotiated. So he has a great deal of confidence in his ability to be able to come up with a solution that advances his perception of U.S. interests. So it's a plus. Having the outcome that took place on Friday will only encourage him to advance U.S. interests. But how he responds to Putin, I have no idea.
Mhm.
I think that's the great mystery there. That, Putin seems to have an ability to influence how Trump sees the world and sees the relationship between the U.S. and Russia. That I just don't understand, and it's for that reason that I think, depending on, Putin's a smart guy, and he'll, as I said, if he wants to use the opportunity, he can, I think, to make the point about Russia being part of the solution in the Caucasus, not excluded. And what that does with Iran, is another question.